Welcome, gentle listener. I'm Voldemort, your faithful servant, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and units of the Warhammer 40k universe. The grim darkness of the far future, where there is no time for peace, there is only time for war. And today, we'll be taking a brief look at some of the happiest and most joyful denizens of the warp. For there is as little actual malice in the Nurglings and Beasts of Nurgle as there is in the honest love of a good scrap from the Greenskins. Alas, much like the Greenskins, the Orcs, the attentions of these monsters may not be rooted in hate or a wish to inflict pain, but it is their inevitable, inexorable upshot nonetheless. And so, as usual, for the very basics, let us lean on existing wisdom. To quote Nurglings. Nurglings are diminutive plague imps that grow like cankers in the foul innards of the plague god's great unclean ones. They are tiny facsimiles of Nurgle himself that gather in excitable swarms and spill over their enemies in biting, scratching tides. With needle fangs and pinching claws, the Nurglings worry at their victims, while the sheer weight of their giggling, farting mass can bear even a noble space marine to the ground. Infested with fecund foulness, the Nurglings cause myriad tiny wounds that fester and blacken in seconds. Meanwhile, the diseased juices that squirt enthusiastically from every orifice smear and blind their victims, poisoning them further. Lesser soldiery soon succumb to this horrific onslaught, while more than a few mighty heroes have met an ignominious end beneath a squealing heap of Nurglings. When the Deathguard go to war, infestations of Nurglings appear spontaneously wherever they go. They wriggle through the innards of the plague ships like merry little maggots, plopping unexpectedly from ventilation grates and frolicking in the cesspools that collect in the vessel's bowels. On the battlefield, they spill from ammo crates, cling gleefully to the hulls of advancing tanks, and even burrow through the innards of the plague marines themselves as they march to war. Some attach themselves to individual warriors, following their masters around like faithful pets and attempting to help in any way they can. Many Deathguard find these effusive mites a constant annoyance as they filch blight grenades to wave, scramble up around limbs to lap at putrid discharge, and mimic bellowed orders in squeaky voices while waving their stubby arms. Yet their presence is also believed to be a sign of Nurgle's favour, for the Grandfather does not entrust his squelchsome pretties to just any mortal servant. For all their mischief, Nurglings prove a surprisingly powerful asset when the fighting rages hot. Masses of them swarm across the battlefield, finding their way into hiding places such as tank wrecks, sewer systems, and collapsed corpse-choked ruins. As the enemy draws near, the Nurglings erupt from concealment like a repugnant tidal wave, piling atop one another and spilling over the victims to muffle frantic screams and rattling panic fire beneath hundreds of flabby little bodies. Nurglings especially favour the Vectorums of the Fourth Plague Company, gravitating towards those ruled over by Deathguard sorcerers. Such warbands as the Filth-favoured, the Prophets of the Seven, and the Bilious Ones enter battle amidst living carpets of Nurglings. Meanwhile, the name of Dulthox Globbergraw is renowned throughout the Deathguard. This malignant plague caster is known as the Father of Mites, and is born into battle upon a jabbering mountain of adoring Nurglings. Beasts of Nurgle. Bounding into battle with dim-witted joy, the Beasts of Nurgle seek not to attack the enemy, but to play with them. Their affection is every bit as lethal as a volley of cannon fire, however, as Beasts of Nurgle are huge, slug-like abominations, whose bloated weight can crush a man beneath their bulk like a spent ration tin. Worse, their noisome flesh seethes with lethal contagions, while septic slime drips from their every orifice. None of this matters to the Beasts of Nurgle. They bound into the enemy ranks like gleeful puppies desperate for attention. In their excitement, they shrug off enemy fire without even noticing, and leave sizzling puddles of effluent in their wake. Lashing out with pseudopods and tentacled fronds, the beasts of Nurgle snatch up unwilling playmates and drag them close, the better to be licked, squeezed and rolled upon. Bones crack and flesh rots, the beast victims quickly mashed into plague-ridden slop by their insistent attentions. The beasts of Nurgle register only a brief sensation of disappointment that their playmates have tired of the game so quickly, before their idiot gaze settles on something new, shiny, and deeply unfortunate. When they manifest in battle alongside the Deathguard, beasts of Nurgle are cynically exploited as line-breaker units. The Deathguard have little time for the beasts' attentions, and have no more desire than most to be crushed under their galumphing weight. Thus they herd the beasts towards the enemy as best they can, often baiting the creatures with speeding tanks, which they delight in chasing, or bands of hapless cultists. Should the beasts be torn apart by heavy fire, those shells are at least not falling upon valuable Deathguard warriors. If the beasts of Nurgle successfully punch a hole in the enemy lines, Mortarion sons waste no time in exploiting their advantage. This tactic served the Deathguard well during the Third Battle for Talon's Pass. When the Scourge Stars arose, Deathguard Victoriums launched strikes against nearby worlds, ensuring that no enemy was in a position to disrupt Mortarion's muster for the Ultramar invasion. On the planet of Daxar, the Apostles of Contagion met stiff resistance from an Astra Militarum force built around the 56th Cadian Heavy Infantry. Though the Deathguard drove the Cadians back from the defences of Haladon City before harrying them across the sulphur deserts beyond, at the mouth of Talon's Pass the Imperial Guard dug in and resisted all conventional attacks. Conscious that his enemies were mustering their reserves for a concerted counterstrike, and that the will remained upon Daxar to disrupt Mortarion's plans, Lord Thelu Poxmore commanded that a mighty summoning ritual be performed. As dark clouds spiraled overhead and the moons crawled backwards in the sky, several hundred beasts of Nurgle were conjured into being and sent gambling towards the Imperial defensive lines. Dozens were blown apart by Cadian fire. Dozens more hacked and blasted apart at close range, but the remaining beasts ploughed on regardless, and the depleted Deathguard followed in their wake. With the barricades smashed, the pass ran red with Imperial blood, and Daxar fell soon after. The Books of Woe. Within the mouldering libraries of the Black Manse, Mortarion hoards endless treatises and forbidden tomes of numerology, cryptoscience, abhorrent scripture, and arcane conjuring. The foulest of these are the 7 Books of Woe. Aberrations whose covers drip with filth and whose pages moan like a bloated corpse when turned. On occasion, Mortarion bestows one of these abhorrent tomes upon a favoured champion, so that they may call upon the incantations within. By reading from a Book of Woe, a worthy champion may tear aside the veil of reality and summon the plague god's demon legions into reality. They can draw the Garden of Nurgle itself into real space, and during cursed stellar conjunctions, even transform planets into befouled hellscapes. Worlds of Nurgle manifesting in reality, like sores upon a sick man's body. End quote. And thus we see that the Grandfather Nurgle has such love in his being for all of the universe, and every single living being within it, that his feelings simply exude from his little avatars, the Nurglings and beasts of Nurgle. Hilarious in concept, a wonderful pageant of pain on the board. These beings show the whimsy and fun in Warhammer, the tongue-in-cheek humour of the past that had been somewhat squashed and became deeply out of vogue with the shift toward a more serious and grim dark setting. Personally, I believe that this form of humorous being and spirit is actually totally in place within the setting, for these small glimpses of fun and laughter act as a stark contrast to the rest of the setting, and by their existence alone, they somehow make the darkness of the setting all the more palpable. I have been Voldemort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed this brief introduction to Nurglings and Beasts of Nurgle. If so, then please do consider liking and subscribing. If you do, then hit the notifications button, as I would not want you to miss out. If you see the worth in what we are doing, then do also please consider joining our Patreon, or giving the video a share if that is beyond your present scope. It would be a great boon. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun.